think we've started to have all the participants and audience kind of slow down to a trickle. George, if you're willing and able, would you go ahead and kick us off with some welcoming remarks?
Happy to, Paul. Thank you. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to a global audience for this 2023 launch of the Fragile State Index. As I said, we have a global audience today. My name is George Lehner, and I am chair of the board of the Fund for Peace. And on behalf of all our board members, I want to welcome you all today. We are going to, I know, have an excellent panel, and certainly want to extend my thanks and appreciation to our panelists who have agreed to join us today. I also know that this will be a lively, rich, and informed conversation, and one that I know will take us beyond the boundaries of state fragility to a look at how a myriad of forces, from renewed great power conflict and competition to climate change, to the aftermath of the global pandemic, to a global economic stress, are all converging to make and create new challenges to peace and stability around the world. Let me just say another word a little bit about the Fund for Peace. This has been an exciting and challenging year for our team, and I want to thank all our members of the Fund for Peace, all the staff members, for their dedication and their commitment, much of which is represented by the work that we will see today. But this is not, and the Fragile State Index is not all we do at the Fund for Peace. We have launched, as many of you will know, a new resilience index, and we have developed and we have started to put into use a new crisis sensitivity simulator. We are excited about these new tools. We believe that they will add to the arsenal of peacemaking work that people are doing around the world. And I would encourage everyone today to please visit our website, www.fundforpeace.org, to look and see what we are doing and to join and partner with us as we go forward all together to help build a more peaceful world. So I am very much looking forward to today's conversation. Thank you again all for joining us. And again, thank you particularly to our staff and to the panelists who've put so much work into making today's event possible. Thank you, Paul, and back to you.
Thank you, George. Apologies, I'm just having a little bit of challenge with my mute button. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Ambassador Todd Robinson, who was sworn in as Assistant Secretary for the Bureau of International Narcotics and Law Enforcement Affairs at the U.S. Department of State in September of 2021. Ambassador Robinson has a distinguished career serving his country in some of the most stable countries, like the Vatican City, as well as incredibly challenging ones such as Colombia, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Colombia. Ambassador Robinson sends his regrets for not being able to join in person today due to a schedule change that took place toward the end of last week, but he was able to provide some recorded remarks, which we'll play before we move on to hear from Nate Haken. He's the Fund for Peace's Vice President for Research and Innovation, who will offer some highlights from the work on the 2023 index before we proceed to the panel discussion. Thank you, Ambassador Robinson, and to your staff as well for being willing to share your experiences with us today.
Thank you for inviting me to be here for the release of the Fragile States Index Report for 2023. When I got my marching orders from George's team, they said to expect an audience that is both knowledgeable and engaged. Since I have a short speaking window, I will not repeat the basics. Also, George is an alumnus of the State Department Legal Advisor's Office, so he knows diplomats can be concise when absolutely necessary. So here's this concise version. INL designs and implements foreign assistance programs and manages deterrence tools that keep Americans safe from transnational crime, illicit drugs, and instability abroad. INL supports the Global Fragility Act. We want to work toward a day when unstable nations riven with internal conflicts can move in the direction of being strong economic and security partners. INL cares about state fragility because, in the simplest terms, it falls to a state's criminal justice system to advance or hinder public safety. INL's experience in aiding capacity building in fragile states ramps up when the state is failing to perform those functions or when transnational crime is undermining state legitimacy. But we also get involved when non-state actors are performing state functions. This brings us to Haiti, which, I note, your 2023 report ranks as number 10 of the most fragile nations in the world out of 179 countries ranked. INL is deeply invested in helping Haiti onto a path to a secure and prosperous future. We've committed $92 million since the assassination of President Moise in 2021. This assistance is going to support the Haitian National Police to counter gang influence, provide basic security, and support longer-term community violence prevention efforts. Globally, INL has roughly $4 to $5 billion under active management, including funding that crosses multiple fiscal years. Our top 4 priorities are confronting synthetic drugs, especially fentanyl, as a top national security and global health threat, responding to emerging challenges, including the situation in Haiti and cybercrime, countering PRC and Russian attempts to destabilize sovereign nations and undermine multilateral institutions, and lastly, bolstering prevention and accountability capacities to counter corruption. We further contribute to national security priorities and what we call whole-of-government efforts by using tools that promote accountability for corrupt actors and transnational criminals. A powerful instrument is the corruption prong of the Department of State Foreign Operations Section 7031C, a mandatory visa restrictions authority that allows the Secretary to designate current or former corrupt foreign government officials as ineligible from entering the United States. Last August, we designated Paraguayan Vice President Hugo Velasquez for his involvement in offering a bribe to a Paraguayan public official to obstruct an investigation that threatened his financial interests. The announcement was a political bombshell, and Velasquez immediately abandoned plans to run for president this year. INL also works with other agencies to deploy targeted sanctions, including to disrupt the fentanyl supply chain. INL additionally manages the Narcotics and Transnational Organized Crime Rewards programs, which allow the Secretary to offer up to $25 million for information that directly supports law enforcement efforts to bring transnational criminals to justice. We recently announced up to $56 million in reward offers in tandem with a large DOJ indictment and Treasury sanctions package targeting fentanyl trafficking by the Sinaloa cartel, including criminals in Mexico and the PRC. In our interconnected global system, no country can fight corruption alone. Each year, INL recognizes brave individuals who champion combating corruption with the Anti-Corruption Champions Award. Often operating in the face of harassment and threats, these champions prove that while the corruption challenge is massive, it is not insurmountable. Criminal justice systems built on the rule of law can counter state fragility and contribute to our stability objective overseas. Programs can make punishment more fair and can also make it more certain. One example I cite is an INL program designed to limit unnecessary pretrial detention in Nigeria by improving inmate tracking. When there was an attack on and prison break from a facility near Abuja this past July, this program helped the corrections service there to track down hundreds of escaped prisoners through computerized records for over 800 inmates. The records allowed for a quick publication of a wanted list with color photos, resulting in the speedy rearrest of many prisoners. In other words, a program to ensure that inmates did not serve more time than their sentence required also helped ensure that they did not escape incarceration. One final example. In Ukraine, INL supported institutions such as the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine and the Specialized Prosecutor's Office are continuing their work under difficult circumstances to investigate corruption allegations and deliver justice for the Ukrainian people. This fight is central to winning Ukraine's future, a democratic future that upholds transparency and the rule of law. To sum up, fragile states are the locus of many of the pathologies INL works to address. Capacity building requires an all-of-the-above approach that supports law enforcement, targets corruption, and employs sanctions. Law enforcement can be more fair and more effective at the same time. And your index is a helpful tool in assessing where the needs are most acute. Thanks so much for your attention.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my video? There we go. I'm Nate. It's so great to be with you here today, and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to share these findings with you. We so much value the feedback of experts and end users, and so it's good to see a good group of people on this webinar today. Over the last 18 years, the methodology hasn't much changed, which makes it a unique resource for assessing fragility over time. But frankly, the interpretation of the index has changed, particularly since the pandemic, as events have forced a rethink on issues of fragility and resilience. And this year's FSI seems particularly illustrative of that. After 9/11, a consensus emerged that addressing fragility was not only a humanitarian concern, but also a matter of national interest. The international community poured trillions of dollars and decades of effort into stabilization and development in places like Iraq, Afghanistan, and the Sahel. But in the last 2 to 3 years, it seems that another major shift is happening, with the refocusing on the geopolitics of a rising China, an expansionist Russia, and a revitalized NATO. Fragility is increasingly an afterthought compared to concerns about energy security driving innovation in electric vehicles, for example, the supply of microchips driving legislation, and concerns about Taiwan, and of course, the conflict in Ukraine, where all of these flashpoints seem to collide in one way or another. In this context, for instance, the recent outbreak of war in Sudan has hardly registered by comparison, despite the fact that it presents a major regional risk and urgent humanitarian concern. Now, after 20 years, NATO withdrew from Afghanistan, and after nearly a decade, France has sharply reduced its presence in the Sahel as part of these shifting priorities. But the thing is that fragility still matters, just not quite in the way that we used to think it did. We used to think that the threat of fragility mainly emanates from poor countries through violent extremism, migration, disease, and the disruption of commodity supply chains and trade routes. But now it's obvious that it's not always true for 2 reasons. First, the competition between major global powers has clear negative downstream effects on many vulnerable countries over the last year, in part due to the bounce back after the COVID recession, but also because of the war in Ukraine. In 2022, inflation around the world was the highest it's been since the 90s. Energy prices and food prices are through the roof, leading to riots and contributing to political crisis in places like West Africa, Sri Lanka, and Peru. And 2, there are significant overlooked and potentially destabilizing fragilities within the great powers themselves, which could further destabilize countries around the world. These fragilities include a demographic time bomb in China that needs to be diffused before it leads to a shrinking workforce, spiking dependency ratio, economic distress, and social restiveness, which could then lead to an accelerating cycle of authoritarianism. It includes a much weakened and even more dangerous Russia after its recent fiasco in Ukraine. And it includes rising retrenchment populism in the West and an erosion of democracy, which could seriously undermine our ability to build consensus for collective action in the face of major challenges. When the public square becomes a gladiator's arena, every crisis becomes an opportunity to blame each other rather than to solve the problem. So we scapegoat minorities and point the finger at political opponents while the water rises, instead of working together to plug the holes and row. All of these findings are highlighted in the 2023 Fragile States Index, which is a diagnostic tool based on a retrospective look at challenges over the past year. For prognosis of future sensitivity to shocks, these same findings are also underscored in our crisis sensitivity simulator, so that you can find on our website, which we built with our partner SAS, a global leader in advanced analytics, We're so grateful to have worked with SAS over the last year as a part of the rollout of our new State Resilience Index that George mentioned earlier. We've been producing the FSI now for 18 years, which makes it an extremely valuable resource for an assessment of short, medium, and long-term trends. In the short term, this year, the most fragile countries were Somalia, Yemen, South Sudan, DRC, and Syria. The least fragile were Norway, Iceland, Finland, New Zealand, and Switzerland. But perhaps more meaningful than the rank is the trend. Because one thing we've learned is that just because a country is on the sustainable end of the index, it doesn't mean that they'll actually perform well when vice versa. Sometimes the countries we think are strong end up performing badly, and sometimes the countries we think are weak perform well. In that regard, it may or may not be surprising to learn that the most worsened countries this year were Ukraine, Sri Lanka, Russia, Burkina Faso, and Turkey. And the most improved were Bolivia, Guyana, Namibia, Philippines, Uzbekistan, Vietnam, and the third most fragile country, Yemen, was also among the most improved. On our website, you can read articles about some of these countries. Anyways, thanks so much for joining us today. I'm very much looking forward to a great panel discussion. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Nate. I'm honored today to moderate a discussion with some inspiring people who have joined us from around the world. While we'll be exploring ideas, I'd encourage you to raise questions for the panel using the Q&A function on Zoom. In the chat, you will find the biographical information on each of our panelists, but I'd like to introduce each of them briefly and then ask them to provide some additional information about themselves and their organization as it relates to today's theme: why fragility still matters in a time of great power competition. I'd like to ask the audience to bear with us. If we do have any unexpected challenges from power outages or air raids, we will be here and continue and have them rejoin as they're able. Our panelists are Sasha Romantsova, who serves as the Executive Director at the Center for Civil Liberties, Jeffsky Pointsy, who's the Program Manager with Partners Global, who acts as the Director for the Center for Democracy and Development, and Esther Deramola, the Senior Analyst at ECOWAS's Early Warning Directorate. Sasha, would you be willing to start us off to share just a little bit more about yourself and your organization?
Hello, colleagues. My name is Sasha Romantsova. I'm from Ukraine. I'm executive working like classic human right defender organization here at Ukraine from 2007. One new direction, it's documenting war crimes which exactly commit by Russia forces here at the territory of Ukraine. At the beginning, that was war crimes at the territory of by Russia forces, and hold the territory of Ukraine, shell and attack by rockets from Russia side, and now last huge commitment war crimes. It's just today we know that Russia make a trial against the 22 combatants, which exactly broken the rules international humanitarian law. And before that, we have a flat at the Kherson because Russia exactly destroyed, and now we know about the Chura that they was blowing hydroelectric station together with them. So we documented war crimes started from 2013, and it's more than 10,000 episodes. And from the creates a special initiative which called Tribunal for Putin, and exactly during more than 30 organizations who documented war crimes hold the territory of Ukraine, include occupied territory, and we documented more than 2 war crimes, crimes against humanity, and episodes of genocide. Except that we have last one, we are like last till movement from Russia, and together with Ales Belatsky, it's human rights defenders from Belarus, who exactly second time sitting in the jail because of his human rights defender activity, totally. So it's short representation. I think when Paul give me floor next, I can speak more detail.
Thank you, Sasha. Can we then move on to Jeffsky, Adriano, and Esther in that order?
Yes, thank you, Paul. Hello, everyone. My name is Jeff Stupasi. It's a great pleasure for me to be here to be, discussing fragility. I'm from Haiti, and I'm a program manager for the Africa programs at Partners Global. So Partners Global's my work really centers on the intersection of peace and security, civil society, and accountable governance. So which actually are considered to be three pillars of addressing fragility around the world. So Partners Global's commission is to strengthen civil society in many countries, as civil society is considered to be one of the key elements to help a country prepare, manage, and recover from the fragility. So another aspect of my work is also the conflict, and most of the time fragility also comes with a high risk of conflict that can be fueled either by domestic challenges or international, geopolitical rivalries. And through our peace and security initiative, we try to mitigate conflict and bring people together to help them bridge the political divide and any other divide, and also make sure that they are included in the political process. So the third aspect of my work is also, promoting accountable governance and stable legitimacy, which is, again, one of the, core characteristic of fragility is, bad governance and corruption and all that. So our work is making sure that we increase the representative and openness of government and create this bridge between government and citizen civil society to make sure that they have more confidence in state institutions. So beyond my work at Partners Global, I'm also actively involved in promoting social justice and accountable governance in Haiti, which in fact is one of the most fragile country right now. And yeah, that's about me, and I look forward to a very fruitful conversation.
Everyone, I am Adriano Luvunga. I'm the executive director of the Center for Democracy and Development here in Mozambique. What we do is in the context of fragility. We work more with the opposite of fragility, which is building resilience. And why this is important is simply because that Mozambique is facing a violent extremism today in the north of the country. And while most people are focusing on addressing the violent extremism, we are also reflecting collectively so that there can be a deep understanding of why Mozambique is facing these challenges today. So we take a path-dependent perspective to look at why Mozambique is fragile today. So we're focusing on issues around the peace dividend. Many of you know Mozambique signed a peace agreement in 1992 between the incumbent Frelimo, which is a former liberation movement, turned into government for almost 47 years now, and the former rebel movement Renamo. But there hasn't been a peace dividend. And the lack of peace dividend it has weakened the possibilities of building solid and democratic institutions. And in so doing, Mozambique has, despite having vast mineral resources and energetic young people, it is unable to translate that into a transformed society, which is inclusive and rights respecting. So what CDD is doing with other partners is building capacity across sectors, working with the young people, working with the military institution in terms of respecting human rights, working with the political institutions, including political parties and key government ministries on how Mozambique can harness its potential of transformation for an inclusive and rights-respecting society. This, of course, is easy said than done because the fundamentals are not right. So this is where CDD sits, and it plays with these two concepts, fragility and resilience, working precisely with the young people, empowering young people, boosting their agency and capacity to ignite their potential and to transform. In our view, as I conclude, this will, on the one hand, give Mozambique the opportunity to build on the catalytic and innovative energy of the young people and benefit from this exponential growth of the population on the one hand, and on the other hand, to improve the legitimacy of the state vis-a-vis the young people, which at the moment is not yet there. And because it is not yet there, the establishment tends to look at the young people as in a delegitimizing way, and also the young people don't trust. So it is there that CDD is working with this concept to bring Mozambique to a level where we can have a democracy that works, and to harness Mozambique's potential to a more inclusive and rights-respecting society. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Mr. Aramola. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very honored to be part of the distinguished panelists. I am connecting from Abuja, Nigeria, from the headquarters of the ECOWAS Commission. For those of us who are not familiar with ECOWAS, ECOWAS is an intergovernmental organization that covers 15 member states in West Africa. The core mandate of the organization is economic integration. However, given the civil wars in Liberia and Sierra Leone, it was thought wise to expand the mandate of ECOWAS to include peace and security and conflict prevention. And for this, we have a very robust legal framework, including the Protocol on Good Governance of 2001 and the ECOWAS Conflict Prevention Framework of 2008. When I introduced myself, I hope I remember to say that I was the analyst in charge of governance and human rights at the Directorate of Early Warning. I'd like to share very briefly what we do in early warning. Early warning is actually the very first pillar of the ECOWAS peace and security architecture, and a very fundamental part of ECOWAS's initiatives when it comes to conflict prevention. We do this in a very robust manner. In a nutshell, we have a team of field monitors in each and every one of our member states, and their responsibility is to gather information through a system that we call ECOWAN, that we see here in Abuja. And our job here in Abuja is to look at all that information, all that data, analyze it, and prefer recommendations to our policymakers. When Mr. Hicken introduced the index, it was very interesting when he mentioned Burkina Faso. And he mentioned that Burkina Faso was one of the countries that the index had identified as inspiration. I would say this is spot on. Burkina Faso, of course, is a member state of the ECOWAS Commission. And for those of us that are familiar with the map of ECOWAS, we will see that Burkina Faso is actually a buffer between the Sahel and what we call the coastal countries of the region. So Burkina Faso presently is plagued with multifaceted, very complex challenges, including challenges of terrorism, violent extremism, which has led to issues of food insecurity. It's for the index to have identified this. I just wanted to say that really this was spot on for the case of Burkina Faso as it relates to the ECOWAS region. Again, it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm looking forward to an engaging conversation. Thank you.
Thanks to each of you. For our audience, we're going to do our best to make sure that we've got time and space to not just have the panelists interact with each other, but to take questions from you. In order to give you the chance to begin to share questions, I see that a few are coming in already, but maybe if I can start by asking the panelists, just in your work, what distinctions or correlations, if any, do you see between fragility and great power competition? Is there one of you that would like to take that question first? Jeffsky, let's start with you.
Yes, absolutely, Paul. Well, I believe that fragility and global great power competition is intertwined, and it's they interact each other, and to some extent they fuel each other in a way that it's very challenging to establish a causal relationship or identifying which of them instigate the other. And it's interesting that you mentioned that Haiti is one of the most fragile countries right now. Is actually ranked one of the 10 according to the index. And I can actually take this example to try to make the connection between great power competition and fragility. And if we're reviewing the situation of Haiti, it's very challenging to dissociate it from the geopolitical dynamics or any great power competition that have been played out throughout the Haitian history, not only in the region but around the world. So, and I believe that since its independence in 1804, Haiti has been like I would say like a field for great power competition, where foreign powers have frequently intervened in its politics and economy. And if we start, for example, in 1804, after Haiti gained its independence, Haiti was largely isolated by all the major powers because of this fear of that the Haitian revolt will encourage slave revolt elsewhere, and it came to a point where Haiti has to pay a debt like indemnity to France in 1825 in exchange for diplomatic recognition, so Haiti could start trading with the world. So and if we take, for example, the 1915 with the U.S. occupation, as the Germans started to establishing a presence in Haiti, where President Wilson ordered a military intervention that actually lasted 19 years, and this occupation was mainly to deter German influence during the World War I, and also to protect U.S. assets. So this is one of the example of how this great power competition led to the intervention, which in fact was very detrimental to the Haitian economy, and that prevented the Haitian to build the democratic institution, the political institution, for it to be less vulnerable. And this occupation actually ended with the good neighbor policy that President Roosevelt promoted as a non-interventionist approach, but it lasted just until the Cold War started in 1945. And during the Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviet Union, the U.S. supported the dictatorship, for example, of François Duvalier, as an effort to prevent the expansion of communism in the country, and that keeps going, in the post-Duvalier era with the different intervention that Haiti has experienced. And if we see the situation right now with the China's growing influence, even though the U.S. remains the significant partner of Haiti, there's also this reluctance that Haiti might be started interested in doing business with China. So I can only anticipate that that's gonna be like a great power competition that to some extent will affect Haiti's capacity. So I think just to give you an example of how great power competition fuel global fragility, and in a way prevent countries from building the resilience that they need, building the institution, building the capacity to develop, and those policies that were mostly motivated by this geopolitical dynamic greatly affected countries' development and their interaction with the global community. So this is for me a perfect example, and I know that it's as I said in the beginning, it's very hard to establish a causal relationship between those two, but it's very likely that in especially in the case of Haiti, great power competition fuel this country's fragility, and it goes also for like great events that are going on in the world. For example, we see it in the World War I, in the World War II, and right now, if we take the war in Ukraine as an example, that had a huge impact on Haitian economy. And just like a few months after the war started, the inflation in Haiti was already, which was already high, actually get to 50% and up. And the disruption of the global supply chain as well affected Haiti, as Haiti is a very imported economy, and you could see like the price of living increasing, and the other impact that had on Haitian economy also is the fuel. The disruption of the supply chain when it comes to fuel was so bad, it led to a point that the Haitian government had to cut the subsidies, the fuel subsidies, which led to the increase of fuel of 130% in a country where people were already experiencing like a very dire situation where 50% of the population experiencing food insecurity. So those are just to put it in perspective, to show you how those great power competition and fragility are intertwined and related.
Thank you, Jeffsky, and I think you definitely pushed me to make sure that we're not focused too much just right now on the present, but how important it is to understand kind of the historical underpinnings of what's taking place to bring us to the fragility that we see expressed around the world today, and also the influence of external powers and actors that we see in so many countries around the world. Sasha, there were both direct and indirect references there to Ukraine. I wonder if you'd be willing to reflect a little bit on your experience and your thoughts around the distinctions and correlations between fragility and great power competition.
Yeah, I'm trying to cover like two visions. From one side, from inside of Ukraine society, we found that exactly were really important for whole the global economy and what happened inside the Ukraine. Because of Russian aggression, it will have influence for the world, from African country to Asian and other places, which exactly we never think about how important our grain and corn, for example, for people which can suffer from other climate changes or situation with the water. And this war, which happened from 2015. And we live with her like live with it like big news because of full-scale invasion. But for us, we really feel it, that it's result exactly previous lack of accountability, previous other places in the world with some aggressive action. Exactly one of such example, it's private army, which exactly Wagner is, which don't measure any legislation, any international humanitarian law, but going not only in such place like Ukraine, but before really active work and exactly commit war crimes in the different countries of Africa, like now in Central Africa or Mali or other places. And we see that its non-reaction for this action bring Wagner to our home, to Ukraine. And it's one of the exactly what kinds of conclusions need to be made even by Ukraine. But same situation with other aggression, which international society not prepared to react enough. When we speak that human rights, it's basic moral codex for whole the civilized world, but we still continue buy oil and gas from Russia, even after occupation of Crimea. We still continue have a negotiation with different countries, which exactly we sure know that human rights broken side the democracy. It's not what exactly they're dreaming about. This money which they get from targeting at the big market, they will not use it for development of economy, to like fight with fragility exactly, and make something more strong and more such society which each person can realize themselves, can define the player or global economy things. But except that, what we have exactly people who control the big resource, state, who care about interest. And one of the such examples, Russia Federation, when we see 140 million people, which interest was just I don't know, don't care from Putin's system, because Putin's system want to have a war or new lands or something like this. But, and it looks like I can speak about that here, because here I'm exactly feel it by myself. And whole Ukrainian economic, which only started be open, only started be implement in different international process, which exactly brings some solution, which can solve a huge number of problems. For example, we're really good to manage blackouts, which huge problem in South Africa, for example, or something like such place laying in corn everywhere where is it needed, or I don't know, develop other process, which exactly huge problem for people, and we can be part of solving this problem. But opposite of that, we part of fighting. We need our resource of our economic destroy of three part of our army. It's common people, which exactly high level specialists in IT sphere, in business, and other way. They need to spend their lifetime at the front line. So all of this is just one of example which enough bright and enough digitalized environment showing, because we can do that. We do that online. But before Ukraine, exists a lot of examples which happened same. But we are not react. So for us, it's like that, yeah, sure, we are fighting. The democracy model still like win at this part of Earth. But we look at this situation like understandable that a system of prevention of war, system of international security, it's too old, not answer to new challenges. So, and now it's bring us UN, you know, it's a member state exactly create UN and need to be responsible how UN react and what kind of responsibility and what kind of obligation each country can take to bring exactly this anti-fragility to concrete, understandable rules which give people opportunity to develop their countries, develop their economic, develop their structure, institutions, which care about each of them. So that's why now I think for new system of justice, because we believe that if you are not answer for such crimes which Russia Federation, Chechnya, previous in Syria, like Wagner doing in different African countries. So if we are not react for that, it starts to be a norma. And this norma will ruin all the rules of security, open society, which can bring exactly strong democracy. So that's why now from Ukraine, we see it like this. I hope we will still be alive to do that. But it's one of our goal and what we want to exactly bring to the international society.
Thank you, Sasha. And I think despite the different degrees of fragility that we're all experiencing on a day basis, I think the lessons that are emerging from Ukraine are both heartbreaking and inspiring at the same time. Adriano, I think both like Haiti and Ukraine, Mozambique has received renewed attention from the great powers over the last couple of years, whether it's the Global Fragility Act from the United States, increased opportunities for trade from others. How do you see the distinctions or correlations taking place or manifesting around you and the work that you're doing there?
Thank you very much for this illuminating question, Paul. The competition between or among superpowers has for a long time had several effects in Mozambique and Africa. Focusing on Mozambique, I mean, if I take the example of when Mozambique was one of Africa's biggest aid recipients, aid is never thought to develop a nation, but it helps nations to stabilize, it helps nations to start to move forward in ways that they can domestically generate revenues and mobilize resources to move in a sustainable path of national development. But with Mozambique receiving one of the biggest aids in Africa for nearly 20 years, that aid, it has failed to build resilience in Mozambique the way that would have expected, because the nations themselves, although they were trying to coordinate, but they were not. There was no harmonization. Competition has put Mozambique in a situation of having, for example, at a certain time, Mozambique as a country and the state machinery has about 30 strategic plans in different ministries and departments to respond to the superpowers' difficulties to harmonize, to coordinate, to work together and support. So Mozambique's possibility of using aid to move forward, it was not utilized because of this donor competition. And on the other side of the same equation, corrupt politicians, they have used this donor competition to steal funds and not to promote transparency and accountability, because lack of communication between nations that are providing aid, it enabled short-term leaders and corrupt leaders to steal funds and still go away with it because of this competition. Not to mention that key democratic institutions like the parliament that play a vital role in boosting a country's democracy has largely been neglected, marginalized because of this competition. Everyone wanted to talk to the president, and due to the competition, the president has emerged as the big man, undermining key and vital democratic institutions. So what I'm saying here is donor competition, the competition of superpowers in having access to the president and to the resources in a context of aid, it has hampered Mozambique's possibility of utilizing aid to move. This was one example. The second example is playing out in Cabo Delgado, where Mozambique has vast gas reserves. Mozambique has the third biggest gas reserves in our continent. But there is a conflict sitting in between the people of Mozambique and harnessing these resources. Many superpowers have come to support Mozambique, but in ways that are not coordinated, in ways that it is not harmonized. So instead of helping Mozambique to build resilience, to build institutions, it in fact further weakening the already weak governance systems, including the army. You have different superpowers that they cannot communicate each other, either in Europe or between Europe and Asia. They cannot talk together, but they want to support the very same institution in a non-coordinated manner, and sometimes in competing forms that, as I've indicated, they further the weaknesses of governance systems instead of supporting. And again, this is also utilized by corrupt political leaders to undermine democracy, to undermine accountability and transparency, simply because the fact that the superpowers are competing, they can easily go below the radar and undermine the prospects of boosting the governance, transparency, and accountability. So corruption is flourishing in a context of superpower competition in ways that it further delegitimizes the state vis-a-vis the young people, vis-a-vis local communities. And with it, it's not only about the state remaining weak, but it's also fragility, which is a product of that dysfunctionality that results of the competition between the superpowers in their relations with already weak governments. So what is happening in Cabo Delgado is what I have described, it is further undermining the capacity of the country to deal with the conflict. So the fact that the conflict is taking longer, it's also a result of this weakened government, which has to do with the way that different superpowers are trying to support, but lack of coordination, lack of harmonization, and the difficulties in working together, it is hampering, it is hurting the people of Mozambique.
Thank you, Adriano. I think that the points that you were making around that impact on state legitimacy that comes in when there is that effort to exert influence and to engage from external actors is really crucial to recognize. And I think that as an American citizen, that's something that I hope that we're cognizant of in all of our efforts, and particularly as we roll out the Global Fragility Act. One of the things that I really like about that is that idea of partnership and that desire to work both with local communities and in partnership with the national government. And intention isn't always the result of great efforts and impacts, but I think it's a good departure point. Esther, maybe if we could turn to you now, because as someone who's looking across the challenges within multiple countries that I think have influence being exerted from different global actors in different ways, and that's manifesting, whether that's through economic means or whether that's through changes in security posture or activity. What is your take on this as you look across the West Africa region?
Thank you very much, Paul. I think the ECOWAS region is a good case in point of how of the correlation between fragility and superpowers competition. Tasha said something in her intervention that I found to be very interesting when she made allusions to the impact of the war in Ukraine on food supply in Africa. This is a very real and tangible consequence of what's happening in Ukraine on the continent and in West Africa. It might be interesting to note that Russia is the second biggest supplier of fertilizer to the ECOWAS region as a bloc. And recently, we have seen that, of course, coupled with the increase in the cost of food supply and the challenges to the production chains have all impacted food security in the ECOWAS region. So to answer that question in a nutshell, in the ECOWAS region, the consequences of great powers competition has been very real, and more so when it comes to food security. But I wanted to maybe turn that question on its head a little bit and talk about another angle when it comes to the context of ECOWAS, and talk maybe about what we call great power interest, Paul, before I go to talk about great powers competition, because I think great powers interest is something that has had a huge impact over the years on the region. And it's particularly interesting to talk about it now in the context of our conversation, because we think we have seen in the past couple of years that there has been some kind of internal mobilization in some of our countries to push back on what is perceived to be those great power interest in terms of economic interest, trade agreements, security support agreements. We have seen a lot of internal mobilization in some member states to resist some of the great powers interest. And of course, there's a school of thought that says, this is also tied to the quest to cut off the colonial umbilical cords that exist. How does this play into great powers competition in the context that we are in now? If we're saying that there's a mobilization maybe to negotiate, and I say in quotes, more self-serving agreements, collaboration between the global South and the global North. It means that there's a shift in maybe traditional partnerships into looking at forging new partnerships. And for this, of course, we've been seeing some key players in that domain. China, Russia have been key players when it comes to the security and the economic landscape in the West African region. I think it's very important to be cognizant of all these dynamics. For us in ECOWAS, it's impossible for us to have an understanding of our human security context without really considering geopolitics and what those great power interests and what those great power competitions, how they impact our human security landscape. Thank you.
Thanks, Esther. I think, I shared just a minute about one of the U.S. initiatives that I hope will end up addressing and maybe improving some of the degrees of fragility in some pilot countries around the world through the Global Fragility Act. I think you could arguably posit that China's Belt and Road Initiative has had similar intentions to be able to kind of build relationships, to cultivate markets, and to hopefully, again, help the world find ways that we can begin to make improvements. I'd be curious to hear kind of the reflections that any of you might have, and this probably affects Esther and Adriano the most, but if others have thoughts or ideas, what is your take on the impact of the Belt and Road Initiative on fragility, whether it's there in your region or as you kind of look across the world writ large?
Paul, could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. So with this big initiative from China, the Belt and Road Initiative, I wonder if you see that as being a productive influence toward addressing some of the challenges of fragility, or by potentially helping build resilience within countries, helping economies grow and strengthen, establishing partnerships, et cetera? Or are some of the criticisms that are there about it really being a chance to exert political influence, that there's corruption emerging from that, et cetera? How do you see that shaping kind of the world around you?
Well, I think the criticism that we hear everywhere around this are legitimate, in the sense that though there's been significant progress in terms of support for Mozambique and for many African nations, but in the context of the current global geopolitics, we tend to see that this particular policy is being more aggressively used, also with the intention clearly of tying the African and Mozambican state to Beijing, which it results in further challenges for African nations in terms of attention. On the one hand, attention, yes, but also the multiplicity of global players that African leadership has to deal with. And this, as I've indicated, it has given room for all bad governance issues, including corruption, undermining institutions, particularly undermining participation, including participation of parliament, as most parliaments, they continue unsighted of what is happening in terms of presidency government with its counterparts. So the big challenge I see here is, on the one hand, of political nature, in the sense that more and more Beijing is playing an influence as to how domestic politics shapes, including who succeeds who, etc. Here in Mozambique, that's a clear example of the prominence of the partnership between Beijing and Maputo, particularly Frelimo. But also in terms of how Mozambique as a society, as a polity, can access to what is happening there in terms of knowing what's happening, transparency, so that there can be some form of accountability. Because one simple example, no one knows how much money Mozambique owes to China at the moment. But what we know is that this is at the levels of billions, but no one knows that. And this is possible also because of the way that Beijing is engaging with African presidencies, and to the Maputo presidency in particular.
Can I go ahead? Okay. I think there are two schools of thought on this. I think there's a school of thought whereby there's a fear that this the collaboration could lead to some reversals in terms of gains vis-a-vis human rights and the rule of law on the continent, and certainly in the West Africa region. I think, on the other hand, there's also a school of thought that says that maybe this could be an opportunity for the continent to start negotiating on its own terms, without the baggage of the past, start negotiating terms that are self-serving and more beneficial economically for the respective countries. But like I said, we looking back at some of the countries that have collaborated on the continent with China for many years, I think it's becoming apparent that some of the conditions that are associated to the aid has become apparent that they'll be stifling. So what I think maybe 10, 15 years ago was seen as a relatively viable alternative has now started to necessitate some questions that, is this really a viable alternative? I think the risk here really, when it comes to good governance, the rule of law, human rights, is that there's also a fear that this could be seen as an avenue to support regimes that are not that do not prioritize the values, the democratic values that the continent and the region are trying to imbibe presently.
Thank you both for that. I'd like to ask a slightly different question to Jeffsky and Sasha, and that is, as you look at the challenges within your respective kind of areas of focus in Haiti and Ukraine, I think that there's been kind of a global trend of democratic backsliding. We've experienced it here in the United States, as you've seen kind of our scores on the index drop fairly significantly over the last few years. And as you look at the changes and challenges that you're facing both now and, Sasha, if we're lucky, upon the conclusion of the war, What role do you see good governance and democracy potentially playing in Haiti and Ukraine in the future? Is it something that you think will cause more friction and actually result in increased levels of fragility? Or is it something that's actually going to help build the resilience of your countries and allow them to be able to progress faster? Sasha, just so you know, as you speak, there's a little bit of a lag, and so you might want to go off a video while you're talking, just so the audio flows a little bit more smoothly. But I'm happy for either of you to take that, and really interested in what you might have to share.
Can I start? Is it okay now? Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So sorry. Yeah, but but we have sometimes problem with internet. Yeah, exactly. That now society of Ukraine dreaming about democracy, not just to join. Sure, we want to join to European family of countries and democracy. I don't know. Party of this world, but exactly we understood what that means for us, and now we feel that it's not only just some guarantee of your rights, it's not just a area for your realization by yourself, but it's first of all responsibility, and that's why we really feel that in both sides, because we have aggression outside, and Russia told you are fake state, you are fake population, you are fake culture, fake like language. So now we need to put this question: am I Ukrainian? What that means and what I'm responsible for? And from one side, from other side, we have inside process like anti-corruption fighting, building new institutions, because after Soviet Union, we still have a lot of institutions which work like decoration, you know, they just give you some notes, don't give any solution of problems. So for us, it's like fighting from two sides, from one side. From other side, we really need to have a good example. We really need to have an example of country who have a deep tradition. And sometimes it's a trap that last two generation in Europe, and I think in the same in USA, exactly, they don't need to fight for their freedoms. They don't need to fight for human rights, rule of law, all of this. They have it from their birth. They have it like a basic level, and that's why a lot of people from there, a lot of foreigners come and look at the Ukraine like a romantic place, but it's not romantic. It's a building of democracy state now near the neighbors who don't want that, and it's a fighting, it's a bloody, it's exactly. Oh, it's dangerous, but it's what we choose because we know how much price it will be cost. So that's why for us it's truly democracy which we feel by our bones, you know. But from other side, we like exam for all the so-called democracy states around of us. We speak about Europe, for example, situation in Hungary or situation in different place where it's touched the economical some interest or something like this, show that not all the people understood that democracy is exactly beginning of your rich and comfortable life. And that's mean responsibility, that's mean solution, which sometimes it's you spend the money, but you have a security, you have a possibility tomorrow have a democracy. So it's really difficult sometimes, because sometimes people think that democracy and freedom, it's something which given you from. It's frozen. Are you hearing me?
You're coming through again now. Yes, we lost you at democracy and freedom.
Sorry,
is something which is given to you from birth.
Okay, so and that's mean that exactly new generation even sometimes don't have I don't know, you know, don't have this feeling when somebody took it back or somebody manipulate them. So that's why for us, when we speak about like being like a championship, big concurrence between huge economic or huge countries, that's first of all, as for us, back to mission of democracy, back to mission of international agency, back to mission of such like OSCE or UN or Council of Europe, of African Council or American Court of Human Rights, something back to meanings which they started with.
You were muted and unmuted again. There you are.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No. So that's why for us it's big competition, which exactly we feel it now, like parallel with exactly war, and it's big exam for whole the societies, because sometimes we traditionally feel that we need some criticize, but we never think what happened if these points which we traditionally criticize will be managed, and how much our comfortable life will be broken because we need to have a new level of evolution of responsibility, international responsibility. Thanks.
Thank you, Sasha. And Jeffsky, you shared just a little bit at the beginning about kind of the rich and challenging history that Haiti's had, I think with the challenges of democracy and good governance. As you look at where Haiti is now and where it may be in the near future, it is really trying to advance and advocate for some of these ideals, something that at the end of the day is going to be productive for the Haitian people in addressing the challenges of fragility.
Yes, absolutely, Paul. And I think, the Haitian people have experienced different systems throughout, Haitian history. We've known monarchy, we've known, dictatorship that lasted, over 30 years. And if there's one thing that, we're sure about is that democracy is the path, moving forward. Even though, despite the fact that we've been struggling to put it in place, which is okay, because, the transition from dictatorship to establishing a strong and vibrant democracy is a long process, and democracy itself, is an endless process. So I as you mentioned from the beginning, Haiti has been, experiencing a backsliding of democracy. If you look at the situation right now, there's not even one elected official in Haiti. We have the government that is being led by a prime minister by interim, which was appointed, I would say, not according to the constitution, so therefore doesn't enjoy any kind of legitimacy or legality. So I think the path moving forward is to take time to build the political institution of Haiti, and to also make sure that we create a democracy that can provide for its people, and a state that has the capacity to provide the basic needs. And what we've seen in Haiti is, like, in every transition, people are not patient when it comes to democracy, because they want to see something concrete, being like a change in their life. They want to see concrete things. And I think it's very important as we look at the future. Is very important to take the time to create the institution that are suitable to the Haitian people, to the Haitian society, and to make sure that we create the ground and the foundation for economic prosperity.
Thanks, Jeffsky. I think that idea of patience is really key. Adriano, you talked a little bit about how much CDD was engaged in trying to build resilience. And I think when we release the Fragile States Index, we can sometimes see really significant shifts just within the course of a year. But our anticipation with our State Resilience Index is that it'll be much more slow moving. And so whether we're looking at things from the perspective of donors, of implementers, of local communities, or of host nation governments, I think that idea of patience and the kind of continued hard work of trying to build, whether it's the resilience at the community level, whether it's the institutions that I think both Esther and Adriano and Sasha had referenced, all those things are really key, but they don't happen overnight. And so that's a real challenge. Let me come back to another question that came from our audience, and that was a question around corruption in the criminal justice system. I think one of the things that, as I've worked more and more in different countries and had different experiences, I came to realize that there are very different manifestations of corruption, and in some cases, I actually don't think that it's a negative thing, and it can actually help contribute to the resilience of both individuals, families, communities. But then at the same time, in the way some corruption exists, particularly when it's done through heavy overlay of the exertion of power, it can really degrade whatever might exist there. And I wondered if you might be able to offer some thoughts or reflections on the impact of corruption and the criminal justice systems where you're looking at and where you're working, and the impact that has on state fragility. And as you're thinking through kind of how to respond, let me just share with everyone, Sasha needed to leave because there's an air raid occurring right now. So she's gone to the bomb shelter. She may be able to join us later, but if there were any questions that have emerged, we'll need to hold those for just a little bit. But for those who are remaining, Adriano, Esther, Jeffsky, any thoughts on criminal justice or even transitional justice as you see it taking place in your countries or the regions where you work, and the impact that has on fragility?
I think this is a key question. It's a key question. Paul, corruption is a problem. Corruption is Africa's cancer. No doubt about that. Corruption is destroying the hopes for Africa and Mozambique to build democracies that are working for the prosperity which is shared by everyone. No doubt about that. But we have seen cases where, as we have indicated, corruption has facilitated people like us to reach out to human rights defenders that are being targeted. Corruption has, in certain cases, allowed human rights defenders to have access to have access to some form of services, including neglected regions. But let us not normalize the idea of corruption working for good, because it is corruption that is taking away countries' present possibility of transformation. It is corruption that is taking away the possibilities of the demographic dividend, in the sense that what could be utilized as resources to harness countries' prospect, it is simply being taken out. And Mozambique, for instance, it had, in fact, the possibility of, after the Civil War, to undertake a transitional justice. Aid was enough for Mozambique to do some form of transitional justice for the victims, the direct victims of that conflict, but also for the generational victim that had not known peace, had known bit of economic well-being, but corruption by few, it has taken away that. Particularly, there is a certain form of corruption which has it kills the possibilities of something kind of trickling down to reach that. Few examples in northern Mozambique, where we have the conflict. If you look at it, you zoom it clearly, you will see that corruption is playing a significant part in weakening the state, in keeping the state fragile to deal with the conflict, because what could be used to boost the country's economic well-being is being privatized by one or two or three families. And this, it keeps the young people at bay, not only in terms of benefiting, but more importantly, corruption, it does not create the space for the young people to utilize their imagination, to utilize their intelligence, to contribute meaningfully to uplifting the possibilities of the country. So, Paul, corruption is hampering the prospects of transitional justice, and without transitional justice, Africa has a long way towards peace and resilient communities.
Thank you, Adriano. Jeffsky or Esther, are there things that are taking place related to the criminal justice systems and its efforts to fight the corruption that Adriano shared with us that you feel are help addressing the challenges of fragility in West Africa or Haiti?
Yeah, I mean, if I take the example of Haiti, it's I mean, I can say that, you know, criminal justice is non-existent for the moment. And we are in a situation where all the institutions have been, you know, dismantled completely. And this is actually one of the rare times in Haitian history where we have, you know, all the political institutions, you know, all of the, you know, political branches are completely dysfunctional. So, and to get into this, you know, corruption issue and impunity, actually, if we link it to the, you know, to the justice system, I think those are the greatest, you know, challenges in Haiti right now, and that has a multidimensional impact. And you know, and it's not only the economy, it's not only the financial losses, but it also affects, you know, something that is very determined in building a nation. It's a social contract, and because of the corruption that has been prevailing in Haiti for, you know, for many and many years, people has lost trust in the institution. So right now in Haiti, it's people don't expect anything from the government, and that creates a situation where, you know, the government doesn't have any doesn't think that they have any kind of obligation towards the people, and the people, you know, don't expect anything from the government. And I think this is you know, this is something that, you know, threatens the democracy. This is something that make it like more and more difficult for Haiti to, you know, to build a resilient you know, a resilient government system. So even if you look at the security issue right now, corruption is at the core of this issue. And, you know, there has been many studies establishing the linkages between the gangs and the politician and the private sector. So it created a situation where the nation finds itself in a very you know, vulnerable position that prevented from, you know, from getting out of this, you know, cycle. And in terms of, you know, action that have been you know, taken in place, I think most of the anti-corruption action in Haiti, they come from the people, from the citizen, and from the, you know, civil society, from the anti-corruption organization that have actually for the past 10 years that have been trying to mobilize the anti-corruption agencies to keep the government accountable. But there haven't been any kind of, you know, progress or any kind of action coming from the government and any kind of willingness to tackle this issue. And I think this is, one of the main reason of the fragility that Haiti is experiencing right now.
Thank you, Jeffsky. Esther, I know a few years ago, there was a big push within ECOWAS to try and find ways to have the people feel more connected to the work that was being done. And Jeffsky just talked a little bit about this idea of accountability to the institutions. Has ECOWAS been involved within any or all of the member states in trying to find ways to connect the people to addressing the criminal justice systems and improving accountability within that system in order to address corruption, in order to help address fragility?
Thank you, Paul. I think in ECOWAS, we're very cognizant of the fact with, one or two of our member states consistently appearing on, I believe it's called the Corruption Index. So I think we're very cognizant of the fact that corruption and accountability are challenges that we're grappling with, and there's work to be done in this regard. It's an absence, or maybe very it's weak institutions, weak processes. That is a work in progress for us as a region. I think there are quite a few aspects to this. The first is our member states are in different places when it comes to having requisite institutions, anti-corruption institutions. So institution-wise, it's a work in progress. It's one thing for you to have institutions, it's another thing for them to be independent. The independence of these institutions, too, is an area that we know that there's work to be done. And there's also the issue of, or the perception that corruption has become endemic. The cultural issues, the acceptability of corruption, not just at the level of the government, but also in the larger society. How do you address these challenges? ECOWAS as an institution has come up with one or two initiatives. The one that comes to the top of my head is what we're calling the whistleblower initiative, which is still a work in progress, which aims to create a safe space to be able to, of course, call out issues of corruption for the citizens. When it comes to transitional justice, I remember that initiatives in Liberia and more recently in the Gambia, in terms of the Truth and Reconciliation committees, have had varying degrees of implementation. So these are some of the initiatives that ECOWAS has supported and been part of in the member states.
Thank you for that. I wonder if I could ask maybe a harder question that also brings a little bit of hope forward. So if we look at the Fragile States Index and the stories that can be told, in Haiti over the last 15 years, there have been times where there's been very slow incremental progress. It's also been one of the most significantly, worsened countries globally, and then also been one of those that improved the most rapidly over the course of from one year to the next. And so there's been a lot of whiplash going back and forth. If we look at Mozambique, we've seen a decline over the last 18 years, and in West Africa, we have countries like Burkina Faso, which were seen as this kind of island of stability almost that was there. And then over the last 5 years, just a very steep decline. In Mali, we've seen kind of an 18-year period of worsening taking place. And just wonder, what can we do to be able to reverse these trends? You're each working on this in very different ways, but what is it that you feel like is getting you to wake up in the morning and be excited to go to work and feel like you're working for a purpose? What's that change that you're helping to bring to help decrease the levels of fragility? Who would like to go first?
I could attempt to go first.
Thank you, Esther.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. I think something that we are working on presently that we're all excited about at the ECOWAS Commission is the recognition of the importance of not just looking at vulnerabilities and risk and all the problems. It's the recognition that we also have to look within and look at the strengths within our communities, within our member states, and as a region. So presently, to answer your question, what makes us get up in the morning and go to work and feel encouraged, Paul, is recognizing that in the midst of all the challenges in the region, there are also numerous opportunities, numerous factors and actors for resilience. And we are now in the process of trying to understand those resilience factors and factors. We're trying to strengthen them. And we're hoping really that this will be a long-term game changer for us in the region. Thank you.
Yes, you said it yourself, Paul. It's a very, it's a very hard question, because looking at the situation, in Haiti right now, it's very hard to see, prospect. But there has been, what I think is very worth mentioning here is that the willingness of the young people that for the past for the recent years have shown in terms of the commitment to good governance, the commitment to promoting to fighting against corruption, and I think this is this is something that the country needs to build upon to create this spark for change, because right now the problem that we're facing right now, they are very, 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 very dire, and people now don't have any, if you look at the past studies, it's hard, they all reveal this willingness of the Haitian people to leave the country, to migrate elsewhere. They also highlight the lack of willingness to participate in the politics, in the political life of the country. And this is one thing that I think should be kept in mind, is the fact that the young people for the recent years, they have been trying to mobilize, they have been trying to fight corruption and promoting good governance.
Paul, I'd like to build on previous colleague who mentioned the youth. If we look where we started with the democratizations throughout Africa and Mozambique in particular, the so-called third wave of democratizations, which swept the African continent, sub-Saharan part of the continent, the beginning of 1990, in different forms. The demographics of the continent have significantly changed since then. Example of Mozambique. Mozambique had 19 million people in 1992, but today we are a 30 to 31 million people nation, and the significant part of that population is the young people, who unfortunately are alienated. An example of what I mean, with 30 million people, of which around 17 million are at the voting age, only 7 million go to vote. So we have a sizable number of around 10 to 11 million people at the voting age, particularly young people who do not even register to vote. And this is simply because the post-Civil War institutions and the functioning of those institutions, they are not attractive to the young people. Or there is a deliberate action by the status quo to keep the young people at bay because they are not delivering for the young people. So although this is the scenario, the situation, the young people are the future of this country. And if you read the African Union 2063 agenda, is around the young people, is around harnessing the potential of the young people to participate directly, but also to bring their agency in a number of sectors and transform the thinking and transform the governance and the workings of democracy in our continent. So I think that is where lies the future of our continent. It is in harnessing the potential of the youth, but that takes a lot of time to be done, a lot of time and dedicated and resources to work on the young people, not as the agents of change for tomorrow, but starting today. They have to participate today as the agents of change, as the agents of the transformation that Africa is seeking and my country is seeking in particular. This is not yet happening because the status quo, it saves those who have captured democracy, those who benefit from corruption. But that's why CDD and other organizations, they are working with the young people. And the idea is simply to ignite their agency as the agents of change, starting from today.
Thank you all. We had another question that came in that was asking about the role of local governments and what they can do in order to build resilience at the community level to tackle fragility. I don't know if any of you would feel comfortable speaking to that, but Adriana's already got a hand up, and others, Jeffsky or Esther, if you'd like to follow on afterwards, please feel free and do so.
Why I've raised my hand quickly, and I apologize to my colleagues for seeming to monopolize, is simply that Mozambique is the example of how political leadership is denying itself the potential of moving forward through local government, local governance. Mozambique is a massive country, you know it, Paul, with 30 million people, massive resources, but it's highly centralized, highly centralized. Let me give you an example of how that plays out, at least from the what is considered to be the game changer for the country. As I've indicated, Mozambique has discovered world-class gas reserves, but in the north of the country, the capital city is in the south. So from Maputo to Cabo Delgado, where gas is, it's a 2-hour flight. That is too far away. But the political leadership is in Maputo. Everything is in Maputo. Big multinationals have signed the contract with the Maputo government to monetize that gas. Gas is in the north, but everything has to come to Maputo. The royalty comes to Maputo. The income tax comes to Maputo. The production sharing comes to Maputo. The local content is captured by the elites. Instead of being local content, is the elite content. And local governments are alienated from participating in how they can, because they are the closest to the people, how they can closer to the people, allow people to participate, and with that, legitimating the state in the face of the population, particularly the young people, but also in giving the young people at the local level the opportunity to practice. If you read Alex de Tocqueville, he went to America, this French scholar. He talks about the potential of local governments as a sort of the place where leaders of the nation, they start practicing. They vote, but they exercise their democracy rights and duties there. But Mozambique's governance system not only is highly centralized, but we had, by the constitution, district direct elections next year. But the government of Frelimo has denied that, simply amended the constitution to take away that right that was up there in the constitution by giving the people the opportunity, the right to participate and boosting the legitimacy of the state from a local level. So the idea of unity in diversity, and more importantly, allowing people in the far remote districts to have something that they work with, that they participate in, they feel belonging to something, and they contribute to it, is being sterilized by the status quo. So this colleague who asked this question, he or she really has asked one of the key questions for the present and the future of our continent.
I feel like that warrants an amen. So thank you, Adriano. Esther Jeffsky, anything that you'd like to add?
Yes, absolutely. I think, local governments can play a significant role in addressing, Haiti's fragility and even furthering its development. Because, one of the main issues in Haiti right now is, political instability. And Haiti is a very, centralized, it's a country with a very centralized government. And look at the history of this, central government instability. Local, decentralization and, empowering the local, promoting a local governance would be a good way to, addressing this issue and creating that, stability. And also there's this issue of state capacity, the fact that the government doesn't have the capacity to provide, basic services, even to Port-au-Prince, not along to, which is the capital, not along to the region. And that could also play a huge role in making sure that, the services are being delivered, in the most remote areas, healthcare, education, sanitation, and all that. But most importantly, the role that I think local government can play is in fostering the social cohesion, among people, because Haiti is a very, the inequality in the Haitian society is very huge, and that leads to a divide. It's very important to, to build upon this, local governance aspect to foster social cohesion, among people, and to make sure that we address, certain issue like, gangs issue, for example, and to provide opportunities to the young people that are mostly, concentrated in the region, in the urban and rural areas. So I think that has a huge potential, but again, it takes time for that. And unfortunately, this is not something that can be done without having like a stable governance, a stable, centralized governance.
Thank you, Paul. I think I agree with Adriano when he said that the person that asked this question asked a very important question. The 2020 vision of ECOWAS talks about ECOWAS of the people. The 2050 vision talks about social inclusion. I share this just to illustrate that connecting with the communities is a priority for ECOWAS Commission. Presently, we're working on an initiative that aims to establish community formations for social cohesion. We're calling them national peace infrastructures. at the essence of this is to really make sure that the communities are involved with the work that we're doing. And of course, this formation would include, central to that would be local government agencies. I would like to bring the example of Mali when it comes to the importance of local government, especially in the terms of security. You'll recall that the return of local government agencies in northern Mali was one of the key indicators of the presence of government at the height of the insecurity in Mali. The presence of the state was very important for people to feel reassured that the state was with them, despite the very challenging situations that they were living. That Bamako was still connected to what they were feeling in those communities, and the return of local government agencies was very important at that time. So Paul, certainly this is something that ECOWAS certainly recognizes, supports, and is working to strengthen.
Thank you, Esther. Panelists, I'm going to share a couple of really quick reflections, and then as I'm done, I'd like to ask if in 1 to 2 sentences, something very short and sweet, you can offer any parting or closing comments or remarks. I did notice that we got a question here at the end, and it's a doozy. I believe it's from Mbuul, and let me take a really quick crack at the first part of it, which is, are there successful examples from countries or regions that demonstrate effective management of superpower competition and aid dynamics, leading to improved state resilience and democratic governance? So obviously we all have our own biases, but I think when you go back and look at how this kind of manifested over the course of the Cold War, there's a lot of different case studies that can be researched. My opinion is that different countries were able to use kind of the influence from the superpowers in different ways. I don't know that any of them were really exemplary in terms of lessons that could be learned and completely replicated. However, I do think that there were some successful components of relationships that were brokered, countries that actually tried to not commit to one or the other and kind of find their own way, and countries that obviously benefited in a number of different ways. But I think what happened in a lot of places around the world, unfortunately, is they used that special relationship as a way to cement power in top level, often authoritarian governing structures that really kind of overlook the needs and wishes of the people. I hope that as we re-enter kind of a new jockeying for relationships and influence globally, that ability for kind of the global South to evaluate what can benefit them instead of just how they fall into one vacuum or the other, allows some of those success stories to kind of be written in the years to come, and that it maybe even they are able to kind of help push this great powers competition into being something that's productive globally instead of something that creates the divisions. I think you've got some other really good questions that we're going to struggle to get answered before we run out of time. But let me turn back to our panelists for some closing remarks, and we'll begin to wrap this up. Jeffsky, would you like to lead off? Do you have a brief thought that you can share?
I'm sorry, I've lost you. I lost you for a minute. Could you repeat that, Paul?
Sure. I didn't know if you had 1 or 2 sentences that you'd like to leave as a closing remark.
Yes, absolutely. It's been a great conversation, and I was happy to hear from all the panelists. And one thing that I want to emphasize on is the fact that the fight for addressing fragility is not only like an internal matter that only one country can address. Of course, a country can build resilience to be less vulnerable to great power competition, but it also should be part of a global effort, because most of the challenges or most of the risks sometimes come, from external actors and from, the geopolitical context in general. So the effort should be like a global effort to make sure that, when we enter, this dynamic of great power competition, to be aware of the impact that could have, on the region or on the global stage in general.
Thank you, Jeffsky. Adriano, I think you're off mute. Do you have a final thought?
Thank you. I think for the case of Mozambique, my point would be that we look at what is happening today. Paul, you mentioned that Mozambique is one of the most fragile states. This, of course, it reflects global and regional dynamics, but it has to be read as path dependent. And by that, I mean fragility that results of choices taken by political leaders, which become self-inflicted, and the inability of the country today to move forward. It speaks to decisions taken in the past, and fragility today is rather a manifestation of ill decisions by big men for short-term political gains, instead of what we have mentioned, Paul, the patient, constructive investment in institutions of a country to harness that potential. And also the difficulty that Mozambique has to deal with current conflicts. It also speaks to that fragility, which is path dependent.
Thank you, Adriano. Esther?
Thank you very much, Paul. I would like to start by congratulating everybody at FFP for the launch of this index. This is something that we're looking forward to familiarizing ourselves with for this year and putting to good use in the region. I think when the index was presented, something was mentioned about the perception. Traditionally, the perception has been that fragility is something that originates from the less developed global south and has impact on the richer, more developed global north. But I think that narrative is changing from our discussions today and from what we know now. I think we see that that narrative is changing. And I believe that the thinking now in West Africa, on the continent generally, is it's high time for Africa to position itself in a way to ensure that we are strict when it comes to negotiating our interests and our benefits in the power dynamics.
Thank you, Esther. I think we've heard from the panel, and it's been implied, I think, in some of the questions as well, that there's not an easy, quick, short-term solution, that fragility still matters, that when we talk about change, we're looking at institutional changes. We're looking at the role of investing in our youth in order to build that future that we envision. And I think that we have to continue to focus on inclusive development and good governance, as well as the geopolitical priorities that will continue to shift invariably over time. Otherwise, I think the challenges that we're talking about, the cycles that we've referenced, they're going to worsen. And so we need to take that upon ourselves to continue to look at the long game and not just what can be done by tomorrow. I do hope Sasha and her colleagues are safe as she shelters. Our thoughts are with her. I want to thank all the audience for joining. A special thank you to each of our panelists and to Ambassador Robinson for sharing your thoughts and expertise and lived experience. I think those contributions have been enlightening to all of us. And I'm also just grateful for the work that you do every day. Thanks again to the Fund for Peace staff for the hard work in pulling together this index. And if you haven't had a chance to read our report, I'd encourage you to look at one of the closing reports that Pauline Baker wrote that really encourages us to not look at the world through a binary lens. It's not just about fragility or great powers competition. I think that much more from what I'm taking from this conversation, that whether we're talking about countries, regions, or the whole world, we're seeing these things and the dynamics interplay between them. And we have to recognize that and use that to inform the approaches that we're taking as we seek to address the challenges of fragility. Again, to reference some things that both George and Nate talked about earlier, this is the 18th year of the Fragile States Index. And as our learning and innovation has grown from year to year, we recognize that something was missing. And along with the Fragile States Index last year, we released the State Resilience Index. And I'd encourage you to go to our website at www.fundforpeace.org and check out both the latest 2023 Fragile States Index, as well as our State Resilience Index and the Crisis Sensitivity Simulator, which is there that can provide prognoses. Thank you again for your interest, for your time, and for your commitment. I wish everybody a great rest of your day. We're very grateful.